Great job producing right there by my man Richard Holdridge, and it's another edition of Georgia Alabama Sports Live Show. Thanksgiving week, which means we got state championship games. We got deep into the GHSA and the AHSAA playoffs. Basketball's underway. We just did the George Williams Thanksgiving Classic. We'll talk about that. We got a jam-packed show. Okay, we got college basketball preview, talk a little NBA, of course, NFL, Auburn, Georgia, Alabama. Then we'll hit on some high school basketball because that just started this week at the Thanksgiving Classic, 10th annual George Williams Thanksgiving Classic. Plus, we're going to have on Jack Patterson of WRBL and Rick Beach of Kudzu Sports. But my partner in crime, Richard Holdridge. Rich. How's it going? And it's a big week in the Tri-City area when it comes to sports.
It is a big week, Thrift, and I'm glad that I've returned to calling sports on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. I missed the championship game for Glenwood and the semifinal game for Calvary because I had an obligation with the military. But I really wanted to jump back into the thick of things and call those basketball games with you for the George Williams Thanksgiving Classic. And I'm excited about this Friday with the Calvary Christian Knights in the Gaps Championship against Skipstone Academy.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's a 2A, not 3A, because me and Richard were talking about this, but they reclassified, did some weird things. 2A, 11-man championship. Gaps, Calvary, and Skipstone. They play for region championship at the beginning of November, and then they just are going to face off again this Friday. As Richard talked about, we'll have high school game day special edition live on field at 6 o'clock. We're going to have some great guests on that. And then at 7:30 is kickoff between Skipstone and Calvary for a state championship. All hands on deck for this broadcast. So we're going to give you the best broadcast possible, just like we did for the Glenwood state championship game. And we'll talk about all that and more coming up here. But as we review what happened this last weekend, I thought, you know what? Instead of me and Richard bloviating for the next 10 minutes, why not have on our guy from WRBL, Jack Patterson, the news director over there and a longtime friend of mine. And he's a perfect guy to talk about what just happened this past week. And there's been a lot happening this past week when it comes to high school sports. Jack, how are you?
I'm doing all right, fellas. It is the start of another busy week. And you know what the old saying goes, if you're playing Thanksgiving week, you've done something right. So it's definitely going to be a busy week. And we got a state championship with Calvary and a bunch of teams looking to continue their playoff run. So I can't wait for this week.
Yeah, Jack, I can't either. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Jack, do you remember, has it been like this during Thanksgiving week where we've had this many teams from the Tri-City area hosting quarterfinal matchups and semifinal matchups in 7A over in Alabama?
You know, Richard, it's very, very rare. And I really have to go back and do some digging. In my time here at WRBL, which is since 2013, I can't remember the last time we had this many teams playing. It's rare to have a prep zone this late into the fall. Okay, so for us to have a full episode of Prep Zone Thanksgiving week, it usually doesn't happen. We usually wrap things up last week, but we've just got so many teams playing that we're able to have another full show.
Well, we're going to have a full show here on Georgia Alabama Sports Live, and let's go ahead and get into it. And we're going to start with what happened at the Crampton Bowl last Thursday night. I had the pleasure of calling a state championship game for a school that I graduated from. It was pretty cool to be able to do that. Thank you again to Chuck Hall, and he's one of the alumni board of directors, and he is fantastic in helping me get sponsorship and helping put that broadcast together along with Tim Fanning. And we go up there. And to be honest with you, I said this to multiple people. I didn't have the greatest feeling heading into the game. I just think it's hard to beat a team twice. And I thought Glenwood, who dominated Atauga, this showed little weaknesses against that Chambers team that they could have won in the final week of the season. They take on Lee Scott, and I know the score says 24-14. But Jack, after being there for that game, it was dominated. It was out of question. I know Glenwood scored a few touchdowns at the end to make it competitive, but really Lee Scott was going to win that game. By the time the third quarter started, they had just dominated. When Camden White gets ejected, which was questionable to say the least, talking with his dad and people from Glenwood, they thought that was an atrocious call. it's hard for me to find what he did for him to get ejected in that game and that of that magnitude. But once he got ejected, the Glenwood offense changed. Crow gets hurt, which the backup quarterback, Levi Pender, comes in and does a good job, but just too much for Lee Scott and Buster Daniel. I just thought that they were the more prepared team and that they came out hitting on all cylinders. Jack, what did you think about that game?
You really hit the nail on the head at the beginning, Thrift, is that it's hard to beat the same team twice. It's not often that it happens. We've seen it a lot with Central and Auburn, how one team may win in the regular season and the other team may win in the playoffs. And we saw it again with Lee Scott and Glenwood, where Glenwood had a fantastic win earlier this season. But, Lee Scott came in and, granted, Glenwood had to battle through a few things. Obviously, the Camden White ejection, which definitely was controversial, and then you have, injuries on both sides of the ball. It's hard to overcome those things. But at the same time, any coach will tell you that, well, the other team coming in banged up too. Okay, when you get to the last week of the season, the state championship, no team is at 100%.
Right.
So it's all about the players who are out there and on the field. And on the field, Lee Scott was the better team last Thursday night. And that was the difference. Kudos to Glenwood on a fantastic season, but I know this one stings.
Jack, it truly was a great game. I was watching the game on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. Lee Scott Academy had just the defensive plan to stop Glenwood's high-powered offense. Glenwood just could not move the ball on Lee Scott's offense.
And I think, Richard, a lot of that had to do with the fact that in Glenwood's offense, for it to work, the defense has got to start opening up. And how does that happen? You got to have guys that can get on the outside and score on speed sweeps. That was Camden White's job. And once he's out, then also the short game. Mason McCrane, a really good deep threat for for Glenwood. But the short game that was the safety valve for Dallas Crow was gone. So then that took away from a lot of the playmaking for the Gators. And then let's all be honest, the main thing for Glenwood, the reason they've dominated Brookstone and Pacelli and Lee Scott early in the season, they won in between the trenches. They were able to push people around, and they got pushed around the entire game. But with all that being said, before we move on, I just want to give a shout out to Coach Nelson. Great season, and their last season in the AISA football-wise. They still got other sports for the rest of the school year. But just to come up that short, that is now, and it's hard to say this, but Glenwood is 0-5 in state championship games since 2011. And I know that's a tough pill to swallow for the Gators. They've come up just short in multiple cases. They were the favorite going into the game, and it's just hard to get that monkey off your back. But Lee Scott's a really good team, and Coach Buster Daniels, excellent job. And I knew they were going to be a different team than the one that they faced against, Glenwood faced against back early in September. So moving on from that one, great season for the Gators and Coach Ryan Nelson. Let's move on, and let's talk some positive. Let's talk about the Carver Tigers. Carver upsetting Upson Lee. I say it's an upset. I know Carver is Region 1, but Upson Lee plays in a tough region. They were 9-2 going into the game. And I know Carver won their region championships, but this was an evenly matched game. And the Carver to win by 1, to come down to the wire. That's 6 straight wins, Jack. 7 straight. They're 9-3. Remember, people wrote them off back when they were 2-3 early in September. Whole different team. Coach Coffey, you got to give him credit where credit's due. He has turned this team around. And honestly, you look at the rest of the way, why can't they make a state championship run?
They definitely can. And, I talked about it when Carver was our game of the week in the first round of playoffs. A lot of people wrote this team off not knowing who Carver played in those 3 losses. Okay. And, we've had that discussion on this show. We've had that discussion on air as well, where you're talking about a Hateville Charter team that's always really good. A Northeast team that until Spencer played them at the end of the season was ranked number 2 in the state. And then you're talking about Brookwood, who was a 7A school. Okay. And most 3A teams don't play 7A schools. All right. So you see this team being able to bounce back from those losses. Those games taught them something. Okay. Not to mention that they weren't fully healthy at that point either. I'm telling you that we learned something from that Carver team. And now that they're, pretty much healthy and they're starting to click, this is a dangerous team. okay? And go back to that Upson Lee game last week. That is the epitome of the old moniker in the playoffs, survive in advance, okay? Because that game was ugly, all right? Well, I use an old adage from wrestling. That game was bowling shoe ugly, all right? But it's not about whether it's pretty. It's a matter of fact of whether you win or not. And Carver, by the virtue of that 2-point conversion on their touchdown, they win, they move on. And that's honestly, man, that's what it takes to win games like that. I think this is a really good thing for Carver to go get in a game like that early in the playoffs, because now you have preparation for that later in the playoffs, because the talent, the caliber of teams that you're going to play does not get easier from here.
Jack, I like that side of the bracket for Carver. Even though they lost the GHSA coin flip, they do play Monroe area, who did knock off the defending champion Sandy Creek and then got the win over Gilmer. Carver's going to have this game, another quarterfinal home game at Otis Spencer Stadium for the Carver Tigers. If they can come out on top, they'll either host a semifinal game if Savannah Christian can upset Lumpkin County, or we're just going to have to plan a trip up to Dahlonega on next Friday, to see them play Lumpkin County.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool.
I mean, absolutely. And you're talking about a Carver team who has won on the road. You're talking about a coach, Pierre Coffey, who has won on the road in the playoffs dating back to his days with Spencer. I remember this very clearly, where he took that Spencer team, the one that made the playoffs as a 3 seed, went into the place that's called the House of Pain in Washington County and came back victorious. So you're talking about a coach who knows how to get the job done on the road too. So honestly, the opportunity is there for Carver as long as they stay disciplined and they stay focused. As long as they do those two things, the opportunity is there for them to make a run to Atlanta.
All right, and let's touch on some of the other games. We won't hit on Harris County, as we'll have on Rick Beach here in just a little bit from Kudzu Sports, but they've had a phenomenal season. Spencer lost to Fitzgerald. Great season for Coach Joseph Carricker. I just think that Fitzgerald, who has won a state championship in the last couple seasons, they were just too much. Spencer, though, winning a playoff game, finishing 8-4, back-to-back region champs. I think these seniors went out with a bang. With the team that had history back in the early 50s and 60s and 70s, haven't been really relevant in the last 20 years, and Kegler's done a really good job. And you talked about Coach Coffey of keeping that, bringing that winning tradition back. So good season for Kegler and the Greenways, that they come up short against Fitzgerald.
Absolutely, and that was one of the games I covered Friday night, and it wasn't so much that Spencer played bad, but Fitzgerald played really good, okay? Yeah. They have a very unique offense where they can run the ball in various different formations. You saw the 2 touchdowns that aired on the prep zone Friday night were out of a direct snap from 2 different running backs. And they had about 5 or 6 different formations with that. And then they had a quarterback that would come in and, he could throw it downfield too. So they have a very unique offense, all right? And, and Spencer can score with the best of them. But, Fitzgerald's a tough squad, and it's a tough way to go out for Spencer. But man, when you talk about the legacy that this group of players is going to leave for that program, I mean, they're going to go down in history. All right. And, I don't want to make it sound like I'm over exaggerating here, but when you talk about how many years it took for Spencer to win a region championship, before last season, they had never won a region championship in the GHSA. Okay. Now they have 2. Okay, they won a game in the playoffs this year. Like, it's a big deal what these kids accomplished, and they're going to go down in history at that school for what they accomplished over the last couple of years.
Yeah, no doubt about it, and I'm really proud of what I saw from the Spencer Greenways. Richard, real quickly before we move on.
Well, Fitzgerald moves on to take on Callaway, a rematch of the 2020 state championship. It's going to be at Callaway Stadium, which, by the way, Callaway's at the top of the bracket. If they can get by Fitzgerald, they will be hosting a semifinal game at Callaway Stadium in December. See, I'm excited. I want to see these teams in the Chattahoochee Valley play in December. We know teams like Schley County are going to be there. We know the Flint River's got a state championship on December 1st. But I'm really excited about all these teams just making a deep run in the state playoffs.
Yeah, I am too. And let's continue on with what I think was a pretty significant win for their coach Rance Gillespie-led Brookstone Cougars, who have said in their football media day at the beginning of the season that what was their ultimate team goal heading into this year, Jack? And every one of them looked me in the face and said, beat Pacelli. They came up just short in that week 6-7 game, and then they went on a tear. They have not lost since, and they take care of business, kept it ugly. Lane Cannon, as DJ Jones talked about on the Sports Vision radio show on Monday, he shot out of a cannon, was fast. Brooks Roney made plays when needed to, and then their defense was lights out and slowing down that Pacelli offense. And the defending state champions go down in the quarterfinals. Brookstone now a win away from playing in the state championship. Jack.
And that was the other game I was at on Friday night. And I was basically there from the second quarter to the very end. And I think it cannot be understated how good the Brookstone defense was on
Lights
Friday.
out.
Okay? Because Pacelli has a pretty prolific rushing attack. And the fact that I don't remember hearing Corbett James's name that often, which is a name we had heard all season long. All right. And Jason Nelson, outside of the breakaway touchdown he had right after Lane County scored his touchdown, we didn't really hear his name a lot on Friday night as well. I think the defense gets a tip of the cap for Brookstone. And then, you said it right. Brooks Roney made the plays when he needed to. I think back to that. There was on that final drive to get in field goal range. Brooks Roney rolled out, had to find a guy and find Chris Vickerson going across the middle. And then he gets out of bounds inside the 30 to get in field goal range for Jimmy Hunter. And then, we say it all the time on the prep zone. Kickers are people too, and you never know how important a kicker is until you need one. And Jimmy Hunter is one of the best kickers in the Chattahoochee Valley, and he approved it again on Friday night. He nailed that kick, and there was no chance of it going left or right. It was dead on the money, and honestly, that was I think back earlier in the game, Pacelli had a field goal that hit off the upright. So you're thinking about that kick that Brookstone made would have been to tie the game if that kick goes in for Pacelli. Instead, the kick bounces off the upright, and that kick that Hunter hit as regulation expired is the one that sent Brookstone on to the Final Four.
Yeah, and it was a great game plan for Coach Gillespie. You knew that they finally figured that they have the game plan on how to slow down that Coach Jones led offense. And I thought Coach Gillespie did a really good job putting his offense in positions, and they didn't want to make a mistake. I don't think they opened up the playbook because they felt like defensively they're stopping and being stout against Pacelli outside of a big play here or there. They just wanted to make sure that they didn't give up and do anything silly and turn the ball over and give Pacelli easy points. And I think that's a great game plan. And they got a tough one against Bullock, who's undefeated in Statesboro on Friday. But Cougars definitely can win that game. They face tough teams all season long. They're battle-tested. I don't see why they couldn't upset Bullock and head on to Mercer here in 2 weeks. Richard, what did you think about the game?
Oh, I just love the fact that these two rivals, this rivalry runs deep. They finally get over the hump, and they haven't beaten Pacelli in over 3 years, and they just get a win. It means more to the Brookstone family to beat Pacelli than to win the state championship. This was their goal. They got it, but you're right, Thrift. I think that they're going to have a tough assignment taking on Bullock Academy next week in the GIAA semifinals.
Central. Go ahead,
Rich.
Jack.
I mentioned before we switch gears is that when you talk about having a coach that is battle-tested, Rance Gillespie is a coach that is battle-tested in the playoffs. A lot of people forget he was one of the architects at Peach County that won multiple state championships. One of them, my freshman year against Shaw, okay? And that was a really talented team. The man knows how to win on the biggest stages. So don't count Brookstone out as they move forward in the playoffs.
He also was an offensive coordinator for Georgia Southern. So if you get a job at a Division I AA school at the time, I don't care if it's 1AA, it's still college, and you're an offensive coordinator, you obviously know how to coach, and he's won everywhere he's been. And so now he has taken his team for a chance to play for the state championship. I think that is pretty freaking cool. Semifinals last year, semifinals this year. The guy just wins, point blank period, for Brooks Stone. Doesn't matter who his quarterback is. And speaking of quarterback, there's a guy that dressed out in the blue and white last year that is now wearing the red and black for the Red Devils, who has 41 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions. I'm going to say this quick, and I figured y'all will keep it quick too, because I do want to preview some of the games this week, and I want to bring on our next guest who will join us when we talk about the last team that won last Friday. But Central, I mean, just obliterated them. I know this is a rivalry game that's been close in years past. Auburn beat Central last year, but I just think, in my opinion, and going back to all those years when Central either got upset by Hewitt-Trussville, lost to Hoover in state championships, got beat by Thompson 2 years ago. Yes, in some of those cases, they were the favorite. They shouldn't have lost. But I don't remember their team being this dominant from the beginning of the year to the very end. And I know they got Mary Montgomery, which is a really good undefeated team, the number 3 team in 7A. But I just don't think anyone is near them. And that includes Thompson, who's won 4 straight. They're just on another level. And when you got guys like Cam Coleman that nobody can guard, and you got someone that is an efficient down the field and a great pocket passer, and I think he has played his way in to his senior year, maybe being a D1, D2 quarterback, maybe high D1, depending on what goes on next year and if he gets a little bit taller. But Andrew Alford's been great. Patrick Nick's got an incredible team, and Central dominates Auburn.
Absolutely. We go back to what I was just talking about. It's hard to beat a team in the season twice, okay? And we saw Central beat Auburn over at the Duck earlier this year, and you would think, hey, man, it's going to be a close game. And, historically, when Auburn and Central meet in the playoffs, it's been close, and it was not close on Friday. And that was the shocking thing about it, is that Central was able to control that game pretty much from the start, and Auburn really kind of sputtered out of the gates, and that was kind of all she wrote. Central it was just all gas, no brakes, and they were off and running. And when you have a team that's able to do those things, it's hard to beat them. All right, and I'm hesitant to say, because there's a lot of strong teams on the other side of the bracket. We see Thompson and Hewitt-Trussville is going to be there in the facing off on the other side of the bracket in the other semifinal for the north side of the state. So I honestly don't want to, say outright that it's going to be Central winning a state championship, but by all means, Central's got a shot to win it all this year.
Central's just playing on another level.
Yeah.
I mean, they know that last year they had a very talented team. They got upset in the semifinals 14-13 to Auburn. I mean, they were expected to face Thompson in the state championship. But Central, you have a wide receiver trio of Cam Coleman, Dylan Dentry, and Dalen Upshaw. I mean, those are weapons that Andrew Alford can throw to, and they got just a great defense, and Coach Nix has just got them playing on another level. Really, the only team that played Central close this year was Opelika, and that was a 10-point win by Central. They've been blowing out these teams, and I don't care that Mary Montgomery is still undefeated. I think that Central is going to roll at Garrett Harrison Stadium this Friday, play themselves into the state championship. But this was a statement win against a rival, which this was a revenge factor because they lost to him in the semifinals last year, and they knew they were going to meet Auburn eventually, whether it was in the quarterfinals or the semifinals, and they just happened to take care of business.
All right, let's bring on and you know what? Let's wait. Let's do one more game, which is Calvary and Coach Emmanuel Brunson. I'm going to say this because I can't wait for Friday. I'm going to say it on the stage. I'm going to repeat myself so people get ready, because if he's not going to say it, I will say it for him. Everyone questioned when he was hired. No one thought that he was going to get this Calvary program in the direction they're going in. Many people, Jack, said that how do you hire a guy with no experience over a guy and basically move on from a guy in Brian Osborne that built the program literally from nothing. There was no program before Brian Osborne got there. And Coach Brunson's come in and implemented his program, Jack. He is not only a great strength and conditioning coach, he's not only a great developer of talent, he's a good X's and O's, and he's a leader of young men that has got his Calvary Knights hosting a state championship game in his first season. This is their third state championship game in the last 15 seasons since they started their program. They are 1-1 in those games. But Calvary, what an incredible victory over the Kings Academy. And I said this on the broadcast because we broadcasted the game on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. the feeling was, in talking with their coaching staff, they felt like they weren't fully healthy in the last time they faced off. They thought that they didn't coach them well. They said this is going to be a completely different team, Jack. And it was. Kings Academy won the first time 27-3. Calvary dominated this one 23-13. Defense made stops when they needed to. Luke Scoggins, Luke Zivak were sensational. And DeAndre Hurd, if you don't know his name, he's a running back for Calvary that's closing in on 1,000 yards. The guy's hard to tackle. And Calvary, one win away from a state championship. That is something that I don't think anybody would thought they would be saying at the end of the season.
Thrift, we've had the conversation time and time again on Sports Visions with you and DJ about, who do we think belongs in the Coach of the Year running, okay? And, my answer has been and still has been Tommy Watson from Harris County for what he's been able to do with Harris County. But if you don't put some respect on Emmanuel Brunson's name as well, because what he's done with that program, everything you said at the beginning was absolutely right. A lot of people counted this team out. A lot of people did not expect anything from Calvary Christian this year in the first year after Brian Osborne, who had been there from the inception of the program, since he left the program, and then now you have Emmanuel Brunson, first-time coach, and this is where we're at right now on the precipice of a state championship. That's huge for this program, not just right now, but in the future as well. So definitely. As far as the game goes, I think it's Calvary's to lose. We've seen them just play at a higher level week after week after week after week, and it seems like they're not slowing down. And honestly, if they don't beat themselves, I really think Calvary can bring home the hardware on Friday night.
Yeah, and we'll have the game on Georgia Alabama Sports Live, 6 o'clock, high school game day, 7:30 will be kickoff. Cannot wait for that. Just a sensational season, and just a great job by the Calvary Knights getting a big win. Shout out to Phil Scoggins. His son Luke has just been one of the best tight ends in our area, and they beat Skipstone Academy first week of November for a region championship, and now they need to beat them twice. And you remember that old saying, Jack, you've said it a couple times. It's hard to beat a team twice. Skipstone's going to come out 8-3 on the season, looking to get a bit revenge from losing at home to Calvary a few weeks ago. But I really want this bad for Coach Brunson, for Calvary to come home as state champions. All right, let's bring on our next guest, and we'll talk about the team that he's actually got the hat on. There's no doubt in my mind County was going to be wearing, be on the head of Rick Beach, Kudzu Sports. And I want to say this first off. Me and Richard, we there's only two of us, and we got to be at multiple places at once. But what Rick Beach did for us in Harris County, thank you to Mindy Johnson, but specifically Rick Beach. He made those broadcasts possible. He also was my play-by-play announcer when Richard was out last week, and he knows the game so well. He gave it just a different element last week at the Glenwood game. Rick, thank you so much for what you do with Georgia Alabama Sports Live. You're going to do it many more times in the future. If you don't know Kudzu Sports, follow him, all things Harris County, on Facebook. Rick, how are you, man?
Man, doing good. Just getting ready for Friday night like everybody else.
Yeah, we got a big one, and we'll start there, and then we'll go from Rick to Jack to Richard. Harris County, man. I said it, and I think I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but at the beginning of the season, I was like, there's no way they go from 2-8 to another bad record this year. Tommy is going to do something. He's a good coach. There's no way they're not going to improve. I thought 5-5, 6-4 at best and make the playoffs. Well, they got 6 wins in the first 7 games, so they proved me wrong in that aspect. They're 11-1. That's the most wins in program history. Yep. But Rick, tell me, what is it about this county team compared to previous teams that gives the feeling that they could bring home the first state championship in school history? What is it about this team that is reason why they were much improved from last year's 2-8 year? You've been there for the whole ride. You were there all last year. Why is this a different team?
100% bought in. Every coach, every player preaches the same thing. They're all pulling the same chain. And like I said, the whole Tommy Watson, it's hard in year one to have everybody buy in. You have, upperclassmen a little bit attached to the old staff that left, and you just you don't get the same buy-in. But everybody bought in from summer workouts, weight room. I mean, there's kids already talking about their goals in the weight room this off season so they can hit it for next year. That's already trying to get there. So they're already in that mode where they're, trying. The younger kids are already thinking about where they need to be next year. But it's all bought in, and it starts at the top with Coach Watson, bringing in Coach Sweat. Coach Allen came in, and they've all got the same mindset. And like I said, they're all pulling in the same direction, and it's just bled from the coaching staff to every player, training staff, and everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, Jack, what you were talking about Tommy Watson being the coach of the year. Why do you think he's been the coach of the year? You've interviewed him. He was on the Sports Vision show on Monday. Why do you think he's been the coach of the year and has these guys playing at the best level I think I've ever seen from a county team?
So let me take you back to back in the summer. One of our last stops on the Prep Zone training camp tour was with Harris County and head coach Tommy Watson. And I sat down with him in his office and he told me, listen, Jack, the biggest thing we had to battle last season was that we were young. Okay. That we were very, very young. All right. We had to start a whole bunch of sophomores, a whole bunch of underclassmen. And, and he made an analogy about when you have to start a whole bunch of underclassmen, things don't usually go well. But you saw this team grow up before our eyes, okay? When you look, once we got past that Troup County game, which, at that time, Troup County was a state championship contender, okay, before injuries took them down, okay? We've seen this team grow up before our eyes. We've seen Levi Watson become a really good quarterback. We've seen Matei Yeoman become one of the best running backs in the Chattahoochee Valley. We've seen Rand Ogletree put his name up there with one of the best wide receivers in the Chattahoochee Valley. And we've seen it all happen before our eyes. Usually you don't see that. Usually it takes time for all that to happen. But you've seen it happen throughout the season, okay? And that's just a result of good coaching, okay? And like Rick said, it takes some time for the kids to buy in, but once you buy in, once everybody is along with the plan, beautiful things can happen. And what you're seeing with Harris County, you're talking about them breaking records that were set by Tay Crowder and Taquan Marshall. We're talking about records that have not been touched at Harris County in almost a decade. And we're seeing them on the precipice of doing some really, really special things, okay? Got a tough squad coming in Jefferson, but at this point, Harris County has answered every doubt that everybody has had. So why stop now? That's my question. Why stop now?
Hey, Rick, we talk about the offense that Harris County has, but really it's their defense led by Miguel Savella, the defensive player of the year. I know Matei Yeomans, he started out as a linebacker. He got converted over to running back. You do have some players on Harris County that do play both ways, but that Harris County defense really is that cornerstone that really sets up the offense. But you're going up against Jefferson. They're undefeated. What is it going to take for this Harris County defense to slow down a high-powered offense in Jefferson and to stay with them and get the victory on Friday?
Like every football game, it starts in the trenches. The Harris County defensive line is pretty much just led. They're all region. They had 15 sacks from Holden Hyatt. You had 14 sacks from on the other end from Bishop Adams with 7 sacks from the defensive tackle, Josh Jones. So you're getting defensive line play through the roof. And if you're going to stop a running game like with Jefferson and Sammy Brown, you're going to have to hit him. You're going to have to hit Sammy Brown early. Don't let him get going. And that defensive line's got to get penetrated. In the front 7, you mentioned Sevilla. You still got Yeoman, an inside linebacker. Christian Olson was first-team all-region at outside linebacker. You just got to come in and start thumping. And that's how you got to beat a running back like Sammy Brown, who is what Matei Yeoman is with Harris County. You have, both middle linebackers, both playing running back, both physical, look for contact. And just for Harris County, your strength's been your defensive line, and you just got to lean on it this game and hope they can keep it where you need to be.
You're talking about bodies colliding. You're talking about hard hitting. That Sammy Brown, the number 1 player in the country, or one of the top players in the country, going against, I think, a really good player, Matei Yeoman. I mean, I would not want to be in the middle of those two when they collide for sure on that. But I agree with everything you said, Jack. Yeoman, one of my favorite sayings I had this year broadcasting was, let the big man eat. And that is what he did the entire season. My man ate in the second half. He led not only, I think, the state and rushing yards in the second half. Rick, you can attest to that. You were there for all those broadcasts. Levi Watson, Player of the Year. Tommy talked about it. People question, should he be the starter? He's not only been the starter, he's been a playmaker, and he's been the leader for this Harris County team. And I do want you to talk about some of the coaching staff, Rick, like D-Rock Brooks. We talk about this defense, but you can't mention the defense without my man D-Rock Brooks getting some credit.
Yeah, they feed off his energy. D-Rock brings an edge to him. Of course, he has the experience playing D1 ball at Western Kentucky, played in the Canadian Football League, played in the NFL some. But he relates to the kids well. I think I lost you. He relates to the kids well. And, his defensive play calling has gotten so good. I mean, he dials up these blitzes at the right time. He got good, the run packages they bring in there. And they're just so prepared for their opponents. The film study they do, and that, the coaching staff on the defensive side just has them ready to go. And Coach Holbrook on the defensive line. Then you go back to D-Rock with the secondary calling plays, Coach Wingard, Coach Nesbitt. That just entire defensive staff's really been incredible this year. And that defense, Yeoman on offense, the offensive line at Harris County, if we want to talk coaching staff, we'll jump on the offensive side too. Coach Sweat comes in from Gainesville. He came in first year with Coach Watson, who both of them played Division I offensive lineman. Coach Sweat at Georgia, Tommy Watson, of course, at Mississippi State. But Coach Sweat brings in this, I don't know, they're more physical. They have an edge to them. That offensive line, Mateo Yeoman don't get the yards he's getting without them. You have Denver, John Spears, Braxton Waller, Ty O'Neill. They're great offensive linemen creating big holes, and they're giving Matei these lanes where he can get up to speed, and secondaries that are 15, 16-year-old don't want to mess with Matei Yeoman in open space.
I'm 30 years old. I don't want to mess with Yeoman in space. You set me up for that one, Rick. I had to come in for the kill on that joke. All right, let's move on. And I know, Jack, you gotta go. You're a busy guy. Rick, thank you so much for joining us. Again, it's Georgia Alabama Sports Live Show. What I want to do is, me and Richard, we're not going to give our picks because we're going to do high school game day, but y'all won't be there for high school game day. So I'm going to allow you to pick the games that are happening in this area. So I'll ask, and then Rick, you go first, and then Jack Patterson. And then I want to talk a little bit, quick questions on Auburn, Alabama, Georgia Tech this week, because y'all both cover college football. So let's start with the Carver Tigers. They take on Monroe area. Rick, where are you going? It's a home playoff game. If Carver wins, they head to the semifinals for the second time in 3 seasons. How do you see that one playing out?
I think Carver keeps it going. They're getting back to hopefully get back to the Dale McGee days where it was constant seeing them in the state championship. I think it's a great venue with Otis Spencer, and it's kind of breaking it in the right way, having Carver be the team that's hopefully going to be playing for these state titles and making it go through Otis Spencer Stadium.
JP.
ODH is going to be Carver. I think they take this one easily, and honestly, I think they win this week and next week as they move on to the I'm about to say the Georgia Dome to Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Yeah, and I can't wait to be along for that ride. I know you can't either, Jack. Moving on from Carver, let's go to the Central Red Devils. You talked about Mary Montgomery. They're 12-0. All right, they are a really good football program, but then there's Central, who's on another planet. Rick, where are you going with this one?
I think it's Central, probably another blowout the way they've been playing.
JP.
Horns up. Central all day and twice on Sunday. I think this one is over by halftime.
Absolutely.
I think so too. And if anyone's shocked by that, we're like, maybe Guns are undefeated. I don't know what team you're watching right now, but Central is Alabama and Mary Montgomery and everyone else. I don't want to be disrespectful, so I'm just going to stop with that analogy because I was going to say New Mexico State, but then I would make Auburn fans mad after what just happened.
I will say this is that we've seen Central's track record against the Mobile area teams, okay? And the only one that ever gave them a fight was McGill-Tulane back in the day,
yeah.
Okay? But in recent times, in the last, just say 5 years, okay, no Mobile area team has been able to touch them. It's only been either the East Alabama teams like Auburn or Enterprise where it's only been the teams up in Birmingham like Thompson or Hoover. So give me the Red Devils all day long.
Okay, and I got to correct myself. I said Hewitt Trustful. I meant McGill-Tulin, who it seemed like every year Central hosted the semifinals for like the 2016 to 2018 era, and every year they would lose to a McGill-Tulin team, who then would play Hoover and lose in the state championship. It seemed like that happened every single season until finally Jamie DeBose in 2018 got over the hump, won a state championship. But I agree with y'all, Central. So moving on from that, let's go to the next game that's going to be hosted. Brookstone is not going to be hosting. They're going to be on the road against Bullock. Bullock's undefeated, and I think it is going to be a tough game. Where are you going, Rick Beach and Jack Patterson?
I'm going to stay local. I'm going to say Brookstone. Just you beat Pacelli. I know that's the big goal you have every year, but now you're at that point where we got that goal. Let's go ahead and win the state championship and match what Pacelli did a year ago.
I know a lot of people like to sit here and look at the records and everything. You look at Bullock Academy and they're undefeated and they played well. People forget, going into the last week of the regular season, Pacelli was the number one team in the GIAA, okay? And they got edged out at the end by Westfield. And then, of course, Brookstone and Pacelli meet up as a 3-6, and Brookstone was able to beat them on their home field. So in my mind, there's no reason that Brookstone can't hit the road and go beat Bullock Academy. So, and like I said earlier, Rance Gillespie is a coach who knows how to win on the road and knows how to win the playoffs. So give me the Cougs.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jack. And, you know, it just makes me think, and I know Coach Jones and Corey Black say the same thing, that Westfield game they should have won, because if they win that, they don't even play Brookstone. They don't even match up with them probably until the state championship game. All right. Let's move on from that. Let's talk about Calvary. They host the state championship against Skipstone. They bring in a home, Rick?
Oh, absolutely. I've known Emmanuel for years. I ain't going to pick against him. I think he gets it in there.
Party time over off Moon Road, boys. I think Calvary Christian just gets the job done. More importantly, I just want to see Phil Scoggins get to celebrate with his grandson a state championship on the field. I would pay good money to see that. So, absolutely, I want to see Calvary Christian win the state title on Friday night. And by the way, that's the Prep Zone game of the week. I don't know if I've mentioned that at all tonight.
No.
But it is the Prep Zone game of the week.
And please tell everyone, that's what I was literally going to say. You read my mind, Jack. How can they find your stuff? So you got the Prep Zone game of the week. You got hits at whatever time you're going to say. Plus you have high school game day. You got double coverage. You got WRBL. You got Georgia Alabama Sports Live. No reason you should not be keeping up with this game.
Well, I got to correct you, and there's nothing for you, Richard or Thrift, but we actually don't have early shows on Friday because we're airing college football. We got Iowa, Nebraska, followed by
Arkansas and Missouri.
Missouri. So we don't have any early shows on Friday. So it won't be any live shots from there. But I am going to Calvary Christian tomorrow morning to talk with the team, and you'll be able to get your preview tomorrow, and then we'll see if we could do something maybe in the earlier newscast just to get everybody hyped up for the game. But we'll have it covered, of course, and then we got a laundry list of games where every game we've talked about, we will, with the exception of the Brookstone game, we will have highlights of every game that we've talked about tonight. So, yeah. And we'll have cameras in, and we're going to be rocking and rolling. It's the final full Prep Zone of the season, so we're going to go out with a bang.
No doubt about it. Prep Zone, one of my favorites, and I forgot that CBS has got a doubleheader. All right, Harris County, the Tigers hosting Jefferson. Do they keep riding this wave, Rick, all the way to the semifinals?
At this point, why pick against them? They've been, Harris County against everybody all season. Big bad Sammy Brown coming to town. The County boys ain't going to back down from a fight, and that's what Sammy Brown's bringing.
I mean, I'm with Rick. I mean, at this point, like I said earlier, every time they've been doubted, Harris County has proven it wrong. Okay, you talk about, when they face Sandy Creek, they beat Sandy Creek. When you go up and they're fighting for a region championship, they go win the region championship. And you're thinking, they'll get knocked out in the first round of playoffs. They did. They mollywopped Statesboro last week. So at this point, at some point, you can't doubt what they have going on. And there's something special going on in Hamilton. So I'm going to go with Harris County on this one.
I can't wait to make my pick, but I think I'm going to be bleeding black and gold on Friday night. All right, before we let you both go, Rick Beach also covers Auburn Tigers. He covers the Georgia Bulldogs. You're going to be there on Saturday for that Iron Bowl.
Yeah.
And I want you to explain, and Jack, you can do this too before we talk Georgia and get y'all out of here. People don't understand because they've never experienced it. I remember Gus Malzahn saying in the 2017, you'll never understand it unless you experience it yourself. And that means, and I'm not just talking about the Iron Bowl, but anytime Georgia or Alabama or any top 10 team really comes into Jordan-Hare Stadium, you got to throw the records out for both teams because it doesn't matter. Voodoo is in that place. It's unexplainable. And I know Auburn just got – I really want to cuss so bad because it was that bad of a butt whooping. But it was a –
Just say embarrassed.
Yeah, embarrassed. But it was a butt whooping of all butt whoopings. New Mexico State came and took their manhood last week. And even with that happening, I wouldn't be shocked if Auburn was in that game when it heads into the fourth quarter because of what happens in that place. Rick, you know you're going to be there. You've covered Auburn. Talk about that voodoo, that it just always something weird happens, and how do you see the game playing out?
The voodoo that made the thicker kicker from Missouri miss a 19-yard field goal at the end of regulation last season, and then the running back dropped the ball at the goal line in overtime. The same voodoo with the prayer at Jordan-Hare and the kick six. TJ Finley beating Georgia State on the touchdown pass on fourth down when he was about sacked. I mean, it was everything but on the ground and got out of it. That voodoo is one thing, but just when you go to these Iron Bowls, the air is different. The everything is different than any stadium you go to, and it's just something about the Iron Bowl that's different. Auburn in 2021 was an awful team. I mean, like we just mentioned, they almost lost to Georgia State, should have lost to Georgia State, and they take Alabama to 4 overtimes. If Tank don't run out of bounds, they probably win that game in all likelihood. So, it's just something about it. If you lose to New Mexico State because you're looking ahead to Alabama, it's okay if you can do something with Alabama, and that's where Auburn's in the crisis this weekend, where they got to put up a good showing, or that New Mexico game looks even worse.
You think they're going to put up a good showing?
Maybe for a half. I just think Bama's rolling right now. I want to say Auburn's going to go in here, but that voodoo hadn't been there against good teams. They had Georgia this year in the fourth quarter, no voodoo there. They had Alabama in 21 in overtime, the no voodoo, but they get it against a pretty sorry Missouri team a year ago and Georgia State the year before. So that voodoo, it's in Jordan-Hare. We just ain't seen it against the top program lately.
Jack.
The voodoo is real. Okay. I always say stupid things happen in Jordan-Hare when Georgia and Alabama go play there. All right. And maybe it's not an upset. Like, we didn't see, Georgia get upset this season, but Georgia should have lost that game. I think I'm fairly certain in saying that Georgia should have probably lost that game earlier this year. Okay. We go back to 2021. I was there for that game. Okay. Alabama should have lost that game. All right. Alabama had no business winning that game. All right. So stupid things happen when the Deep South Soldiers rivalry and the Iron Bowl take place at Jordan-Hare. So the common sense will tell you that Alabama should win this game going away. Okay. And it wouldn't surprise me if it happened. But just as a sports fan, as a sports analyst, I can't not help but know the crazy things that go on in that stadium for whatever godforsaken reason. Okay. I couldn't tell you why. All right. Don't ask me to explain it. It just happens. We've seen it with the prayer in Jordan-Hare. We've seen it with the kick six. We saw it with the Missouri game, the Georgia State game I was there for. They should have lost that game too. There's so many times we've seen just the craziest things happen inside that stadium. And Rick is absolutely right, okay? When you walk into an environment like the Iron Bowl, it just hits different, okay? Like, I don't care if you are a player. I don't care if you are a coach. I don't care if you are a fan. Heck, I don't care if you're a media person. When I walk into the Iron Bowl, listen, I covered Georgia and Georgia Tech, and I've also covered the Iron Bowl, okay? No disrespect to Georgia Tech fans or the Georgia fans, of which I am one, but the Iron Bowl just hits different, okay? And this is going to be this game is so important. Nick Saban talked about it earlier today, that you're talking about, they can't afford any slip-ups here, okay? They can't afford to take this game lightly because they have no room for error. If they screw up this game and they lose, their playoff hopes are done, okay? No matter what they do in the SEC championship. So they can't afford to let a slip-up happen. So you know they're going to be at their best, and you know Hugh Freeze is going to have his team at their best after the nonsensical things that happened inside that stadium last Saturday. So, needless to say, I think you're going to get both teams' best. It would not surprise me if this game came down to the wire once again.
I got Josh Payton, Richard, but right real quickly before you say something, and then we move on to the last question. My guy Josh Pate, he made the statement and brought up the stat that Auburn is like 87th, 90th, and big plays, explosive plays on defense, giving up, and then on the flip side, Alabama is top 10 in explosive plays. That is their offense. They run the football, and then Jalen Milroe throws a bomb to Jermaine Burton or Isaiah Bond. So that is a recipe for disaster. I'm with Rick. I think it's going to be close in that first half. Momentum will, and then the crowd will keep it into it. And then a couple of big plays here and there. Final score will be like 38-17, 31-10. Bama will win a 21-point game, and Auburn will go licking their wounds as they try to improve on a 6-6 season next year. Richard, real quickly.
This looks like a mismatch, but they don't play this game on paper. Alabama, they are a favorite for a reason because they are rolling. But Auburn has a chance to ruin Alabama's season. About a year ago, they did hire Hugh Freeze for one reason and one reason only, to beat Alabama. I love this rivalry. It's probably the greatest rivalry in all of sports. I mean, you can debate what's the greatest rivalry in college football, Michigan, Ohio State, or Alabama, Auburn. I mean, we're down in the South. We know how big this is. I mean, they made an ESPN documentary on it. I felt like they needed to make a second one after all the chaos that happened after that. I mean, this is just absolutely incredible, and I can't wait for this game.
And I can't either. 3:30 kickoff. Rick Beach will be there. Make sure to follow him on Kudzu Sports, Auburn. And so will Jack Patterson, no doubt about it.
We're reuniting the Highlight Factory. It'll be me and Rex there on Saturday. And you can watch the game on WRBL too.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I won't be there for that game, and I wish I could. But as busy as I stay, I decided, you know what, I'd rather watch from the comfort of my own home, because guess what? This leads into my next question. I will be at the SEC Championship game. Third year in a row, baby. Shout out to DJ Jones of Sports Visions. Cannot wait to go and cover that game. And that's my last question for both of you gentlemen before we let you go. You can touch a little bit on Georgia Tech. I don't see Georgia overlooking anyone as long as Kirby Smart's the head coach. And Georgia Tech has been a really good team under Brent Key, 6-5 improvement. I think he has them in the right direction. I think they will be very competitive in the ACC year in the next couple of years. No doubt in my mind. But I think they're going to take care of business, win that by 30 points. So touch on Georgia Tech, that rivalry, and give us a quick preview of that Alabama-Georgia game that everyone's looking forward to next Saturday, SEC Championship. Rick, you can go first, and Jack.
Yeah, I think the Georgia Tech. Look, Kirby Smart hates Georgia Tech. He lost to them as a player. His first year at Georgia, the home loss to Georgia Tech, it stuck with him. I mean, he's a personal guy. It gets personal. Georgia Tech is a personal with Kirby Smart. It's not going to be close. Buster Faulkner was Todd Monken's assistant last year, a little analyst. He's offensive coordinator at Georgia Tech. They're going to come out. The crowd noise has no effect. It's going to be about 80% Georgia fans at Bobby Dodd. Georgia's going to roll. It's going to be about like they did with Tennessee. I mean, it's going to be, 14-0, 24-0. Then you look up and it's 41-0 in the fourth quarter. And Georgia's just leaning on them until they break. As far as the SEC championship with Alabama, it's going to be like every other game we see with Georgia and Alabama. The only team in the country that can match up player for player with Georgia is Alabama. And I think to an extent, it's kind of the reverse that we saw in 2018. We know Georgia had the loss early in the year. They come in.
Good point.
They play the Alabama team. Then Alabama, Tua got hurt in that game. Jalen Hurts came in. But Georgia had a chance up by 14, and Blankenship missed the field goal. So, then it was like Georgia's trying to get to that point. And if you're Georgia, this has to be the time that you put your foot down against Alabama and try to, dominate them the best you can, because you don't want to let Alabama hang around, because they will beat you if you're Georgia. And I think that's the only team in the country that can beat Georgia.
As far as Tech goes, I mean, this game, let's see, it starts at 7:30. It'll probably be over by 8:15. So
It's ABC kickoff, by the way. They're trying to put that in prime time, trying to raise it up. Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler will be on the call, by the way, and I'm just like,
solely because Georgia is the number one team in the country. Okay,
yeah.
There is no other. Like, listen, Georgia Tech is having a fantastic season. Brent Key, first year, they're bowl eligible for the first time since 2018. He has done a fantastic job with this program, and I agree with Rick. Georgia Tech's going to be a problem in the ACC in a couple of years. If we're having this conversation 2 years now, it might be a different story. But as far as today goes, Tech's just not there yet. Okay, and I think Georgia is going to be. This is going to be another tune-up. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if Tech goes down, score a first quarter touchdown on Georgia, because it seems like everybody else does, and then next thing you know, Georgia's up by 20. Okay, that's how this one goes. Okay, I think this one is pretty easy for Georgia. And then as far as the SEC championship goes, this one will be close. But you know, I've said it once and I said it 1,000 times. And in the words of the Nature Boy Ric Flair, in order to be the man, you have to beat the man. Okay, and right now the man is Georgia. All right, and until they are beaten, I got to go with Georgia. Not saying that Alabama can't beat them, because they absolutely can. They've got the weapons on offense. They've got the weapons on defense, okay? They have the chances to do it. But we've been seeing both of these teams clicking on all cylinders on the back end of the season. Really, the only slip-ups I've seen of them lately, of course, Alabama was in that shootout with LSU until Jaden Daniels got hurt, you know, and then Missouri gave Georgia a fight a couple of weeks back too. But outside of that, both teams have been playing lights out football. It's going to be a classic inside of Mercedes-Benz. That's all I can say.
Yeah, and I know you'll be there, JP. I'll be seeing you. Me and DJ, you know, we dress up in our finest when we go to big-time games like that. We don't – no sweatsuits, even though we got the full sweatsuit gear. We don't do sweatsuits when we go to SC Championship game. It's suited and booted, as DJ Jones like to say. That's Rick Beach from Kudzu Sports. You want to keep up with all things county. He'll have highlights up. He'll have score updates. If you want to keep up with Harris County Jefferson, follow him on Facebook, please. And he not only does that, he covers the Auburn Tigers. And Jack Patterson, WRBL News 3. You see his Twitter handle and everything else right there at J Patterson TV. Gentlemen, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. Tell your lovely wife, both your lovely wives, thank you so much for allowing you to be a part of Georgia Alabama Sports Live when I need you, and have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see y'all on Friday.
We'll see you, man.
See ya.
All right, and that's Jack Patterson and Rick Beach as we get them off the screen. It is time now. We're going to quickly do, Richard, this is going to be a long show, okay? We knew this was going to be close to an hour and a half, and we're going to go into a little bit more college football as we head into the rest of the season. I mean, rest of the final week of the season. Can't get it out. And then touch on some Falcons, and then we'll do our college basketball preview, maybe a little bit of Hawks, and we'll get out of here. And we touched on Alabama and Auburn. We touched on Georgia Tech. Michigan, Ohio State is the game, and it's the only really game of higher magnitude. Now, I do think there's going to be upsets. I think Florida could beat Florida State, to be honest with you, Richard. But the game that means the most out of all of them is Michigan taking on Ohio State, as the Ohio State Buckeyes have lost back-to-back years to Michigan. And you want to hear cries for someone's head to be chopped and put on the chopping block? That'd be Ryan Day if he loses a third time to Michigan Wolverines without Jim Harbaugh. So with that being said, how do you see this one playing out, Richard? Because in my opinion, I don't think there's any way Ohio State loses 3 straight years. I just can't see it. Ryan Day, he has put all his eggs in this basket after what we've seen from them against the Wolverines the past 2 seasons. I think their defense is going to hold up. I think weather may be a factor, but it'll play into the hands of Ohio State, who can play. You know, they can be finessed, and they also can be ground and pound, and they can be tough and physical. I think they win this game, to be honest with you. And Michigan goes to the Rose Bowl. It's a good consolation prize. I don't see like last year where Ohio State loses to Michigan and still makes the playoffs. There's too many good teams left. They're not going to make it. There's going to be already 3 other teams vying for that last playoff spot. So whoever loses this game is completely out of it. What do you got, Richard?
I agree. Michigan is favored by 3. They are playing in the Big House. playing without Jim Harbaugh. I actually don't think that's a factor because he's got a great coaching staff. Ohio State, all the pressure's on Ohio State to win this game, especially with Coach Ryan Day on the hot seat. But I think Michigan has the more experienced quarterback with J.J. McCarthy. Remember, last year when Michigan beat Ohio State at the Horseshoe, they blew them out. It was close in the first half, and they just ran the football, and they didn't even have Blake Corum. And J.J. McCarthy, he passed for over 300 yards. Ohio State defense put 7 in the box trying to stop their running back. And I think that this game, the difference is that Blake Corum is going to play, and then J.J. McCarthy is the more experienced quarterback compared to Kyle McCord. He's only a freshman. Yes, he is a little battle-tested. He did win at South Bend, but I think Michigan will win and get their 3rd straight victory over Ohio State. That's got to make Michigan fans happy. And then you're right. Ryan Day becomes on the hot seat. If he can't beat Michigan 3 years in a row, yeah, he's definitely on a hot seat.
By the way, next week, I wanted to do it this week, but we just had so much we were doing today. It's hard. So next week, I am going to start our unmitigated gall of the week and then Man in the Mirror segment, in which you'll hear Michael Jackson playing, looking the man in the mirror, and then we're going to come up with some people that need to look in the mirror and change themselves. And I think a perfect time would be at the end of after the regular season ends for college football. We'll have a lot of names and programs and faces that will be looking in the mirror. And also our unmitigated gall of the week, which is created by Stephen A. Smith. His articulation is at its finest when he comes up with words and phrases like that one. I'm with you, Richard. I just don't see it, and I'm gonna pick the upset. But I did want to click on just some other games that look out for. I said Florida State and Florida. That could be on upset alert. I definitely see one of those teams. I mean, Florida having a chance to upset Florida State without Jordan Travis. And I hate that for Florida State because I think they're a really good program. If they have Jordan Travis with those Wilson and Coleman, why can't they make a national championship? They got a really good defense. This is obviously their best team since 2014. I think this is better than the 14 team. Not as good as the 13 team, but better than the 14 team that went undefeated in Jimbo Fisher's tenure. And just have it ripped underneath them against North Alabama of all teams. I know that is a very tough pill to swallow. Oregon State goes on the road to Oregon. Could be an upset alert to be on the lookout for. I don't see it. I think Oregon and Bo Nix are they're at another level. And if Oregon beats Oregon State and beats Washington, a guy that wore the orange and blue is going to be your Heisman winner. That's Bo Nix. Think about saying that in 2022, 2021, after the season. He decides to transfer. Everybody's like, Bo Nix sucks. And my man's going to win a Heisman in his 5th year as a quarterback in college football. And he could be quarterback in the Auburn Tigers. And the one thing they desperately needed this year, quarterback. Think about they had him. They're probably 9-3, 10-2, going a really good bowl game. Instead, he's playing for Oregon and playing maybe for a national championship this year. And Oregon, I think, is better than Washington. And this time, it'll be on a neutral field in Las Vegas. I think they'll take them. They got to get through Oregon State. I don't think that's going to be an upset. Kentucky, though, against Louisville, that's one I can see as an upset alert. So keep an eye out on that one. And really looking at the rest of the games, I don't see any other upset. I mean, Clemson's ranked 24th now. I think they're going to blow out South Carolina and go 8-4. Since Tyler from Spartanburg has made his appearance on the Dabo Sweeney show, Clemson's been on I think, 4 3-game winning streak since then. Any other games you want to talk about, Richard? You think maybe on upset alert? I said Florida State, Florida, Kentucky, Louisville. I said games to be on the lookout for. Maybe Oregon State, Oregon. What about you?
I am not 100% sure. I mean, I think if Oregon does beat Oregon State and beat Washington in the Pac-12 championship, they are going to go to the college football playoff. And I can't believe I'm saying this. For a team that got blown out by Georgia, in Bo Nix's first start as an Oregon Duck, 49-3. And the turnaround of what Oregon done has been incredible. But, yeah, I'm looking at some of these.
Yeah, and let me say this, Richard, because you just brought up a good point. Let's say Florida State does lose. Your top 4 would be 1, Georgia, 2, Ohio State, 3 would be Oregon, 4 then would be, 1 would be Georgia. And let's say Ohio State beats Michigan. 1 would beat Georgia. 2 would be Ohio State. If it goes the way we think. 1 on Georgia, 2 Ohio State, 3 Oregon. 4, surprisingly enough, would be Texas. If they win, they would be number 4. And then number 5, if Florida State again loses, Michigan again loses. Looking at the rest of the top 10, I think Washington does win. I just butchered that. 1 Georgia, 2 Ohio State, 3 Washington, 4 Oregon, 5 then would be Texas, 6 would be Bama. And then you would have Michigan at 7, and 8 would be Florida State. That would be your top 8 right there. And that means that if Oregon beats Washington, that you would have Oregon, Ohio State, and the winner of Georgia, Bama would be the 3 that are in. And that last spot would be between a 1-loss Washington team, a 1-loss Texas team, 1-loss Michigan team, a 1-loss Georgia team. If Georgia loses to Bama, if Bama loses, they're out. They won't be in contention. But if Georgia loses to Bama, then you got to put Georgia in that mix for that last spot. And how do you leave Texas out? How do you leave Washington out? What about Georgia defending back-to-back national champions? The committee's going to have a tough time.
I agree.
Upsets that happen.
I know their schedule hasn't been all that great, but you kind of got to consider if a 1-loss Louisville team beats Florida State in the ACC championship. I'm not saying put them in, but I mean they have beaten Notre Dame. I mean they have some pretty good quality wins, but they're on the outskirts looking in. I mean Missouri's the best 2-loss team. I think I think they're going to get a New Year's 6 bowl game.
I don't think there's any chance Louisville gets in.
I agree. I'm just saying that if they do beat Florida State in the ACC championship, they're a conference championship and they're a 1-loss. You could throw them in with all those other 1-loss teams.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's just going to be – this is for the first time since the first year of the college football playoff. The committee may not get it right. And the thing is, I don't think anyone knows what the right answer is. And people are going to get left out. And we'll see. We'll see what –
wide open.
It's chaos time. It's November.
I'm rooting for chaos.
Yeah, and who does
2007 all over again?
Yeah, so December the 3rd. That's the date you need to put on your calendar because that's when the college football final playoff seedings are finally put up there, and we'll know who's going to be playing in the semifinal games. All right, it's time now for our college basketball preview, and then we'll end the show with some Falcons talk and Hawks. College basketball is one of my favorite sports, and I know many people don't keep up with it, don't care about it till March Madness, but me and Richard are not one of those guys, and we're going to do our preview. And I guess we'll start with the team that everyone thinks is the favorite to win it all this year, which is the Kansas Jayhawks. And mainly is because of Hunter Dickerson, who had a double-double the other night. Kansas is just – they're a senior-led team in Bill Self, and they have, just like Udoka as a Buki, just like 2 years ago in the national championship, they got a guy that's going to be vying for Player of the Year candidacy. Kansas, you got Purdue with Zach Edey. You got Arizona, obviously, with their coach that came from Mark Few, Gonzaga. But, Richard, who are some of your teams that you're on the lookout for?
Well, I mean, you got to start with the local teams. I think that Auburn is going to have a bounce-back year. I think Bruce Pearl is going to get Auburn. Alabama, they are ranked. I think that Kentucky, I was looking at the 2024 mock NBA draft. Kentucky's got some players. I know that John Calipari does not get them to make deep tournament runs. He does get talent to Kentucky, but they have underachieved over the years. But I like the roster that they give. We got a huge game tonight as Kansas is taking on Marquette. I like the Marquette Golden Eagles. I mean, fun fact, they're the last non-football school to win an NCAA championship. They won that back in 1977.
Well, they did play already, Richard. That game already did happen because that game happened on Tuesday night, and
that's right.
You got to get your days right. But either way, Kansas is a really good team. And I guess, you know what? Instead of being all over the place, let's start with the SEC, and then we'll move our way out. You talked about Kentucky. You got Tennessee, who lost to Purdue last night. but Tennessee, and they'll by 4 to the number 2 team in the country. Tennessee is the favorite to win the SEC championship. I think they're my favorite. Rick Barnes' team always plays good defense. Josiah James seems like he's been there 100 million years. But with all that being said, and as good as Tennessee's been, Zagai Ziegler and this guy who is off the top of my head, I cannot remember his name, and I don't know how because he's literally been playing for Tennessee, it seems like going on 10 years, which is Santiago Vescovi, who is like a fifth-year senior still playing, but Josiah Jordan James, Jonas Adu, and then Dalton Nett, who is a transfer coming in, who's putting up 19 points a game, but defense is their key. And Rick Barnes' team is going to, again, be vying for another conference championship. I honestly think, and this is not a homer pick, the Auburn Tigers, this is the deepest Auburn team they've had, and that even goes back to the 2021 team because now they got great front court and Jalen Williams and Janai Broom. They got good front court bench players that can come in and give them rest like Dylan Cardwell. And they got guys like Chris Moore who do the little things right. They got Denver Jones, the FIU transfer who can knock down threes. They got the junior college transfer who's long and athletic. They got Aiden Holloway, who's a freshman sensation. Trey Donaldson, guy comes off the bench, knock down threes. They're long, they're athletic, which they haven't had in a while. They got guards that can knock down threes. Hitting shots was something that the Tigers struggled with last year. So I like this Auburn team a lot, and I honestly think that they're going to be, because it's Bruce Pearl-led team, they're going to be in the mix as a top 4 seed heading into the SEC tournament.
Couple teams that I like in the SEC. I really like the Arkansas Razorbacks. They are 20th in the nation.
But they lost a lot from last year's team. You know,
they
Jordan
did.
Johnson, the scorer that put up 20 points a game. He left to go into the draft, but this guy,
that'd be Anthony Black. He plays for the Magic.
Yeah, Anthony Black, who was a really good player. But Ricky Council, they also have to replace from last year's team. Nick Smith Jr., who I was talking about, who got hurt a lot last year. He was also one of their leaders, but they replaced with great talent, and that's what you expect from an Arkansas team.
Well, they were an 8th seed last year. They upset Kansas in the second round. If it wasn't for UConn, just plays on another level when they get to the NCAA tournament. You got a guy like, Kemba Walker or Shabazz Napier just going off the chains, and then why not? I mean, UConn just wins another championship, and that was the team that knocked out
Arkansas. Made Sweet 16 though, and they made Elite 8 back-to-back years. Exactly. Eric Musselman is a really good coach,
very underrated college basketball coach.
And I'm with you. I think Arkansas is a team that'll be reckoned with. Missouri is really good. Alabama, as you can tell with that Alabama-led team, they will be competitive. There'll be 8 teams in the SEC that make the NCAA tournament, and I think Georgia under Mike White can be competitive this year. This is going to be – I remember 10 years ago when SEC was getting 2-3 teams in the NCAA tournament. Those days are long gone. The SEC cares about basketball. I know they haven't won a national championship in a long time since Kentucky won it back in 2011, 2012. But with that being said, they are a competitive basketball team, and we hadn't even mentioned Buzz Williams in Texas A&M, who
that's right.
Everyone from a team last year that got hot at the right time, went into the NCAA tournament. They were the number 2 seed in the SEC tournament, and Texas A&M returns majority of their players. Why can't you put A&M, who's also a top 12 team right now, ranking-wise? A&M is definitely a favorite with Tennessee. Wade Taylor is their leading scorer. He returns. Henry Coleman seems like he's been there forever. Tyrese Radford. These guys were on that team that upset Auburn 2 years ago in the SEC championship game when they were struggling all season long. Remember, A&M made a deep playoff run, the SEC tournament run. Many people thought they were going to get in the NCAA tournament, and they end up not. But A&M, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky, Auburn, those 6 teams for sure, I think, are going to make the NCAA tournament. And then who knows, you're going to have teams that are come out of nowhere. Missouri will be competitive this year. Georgia, like I said, will be competitive this year. Mississippi State's ranked right now Why can't they make an NCAA tournament? Mississippi State, who's ranked number 25 in the country, Florida, LSU, Ole Miss, all these teams I think are going to be competitive and have a chance to make an NCAA tournament. This could be the deepest SEC team they've had in a long SEC season they had in a few years.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking at the first team preseason all SEC team. You have 7 players all from 7 different schools. That's how much talent is in the SEC. I mean, you look at the second team, you got Mark Sears from Alabama. You got Devontae Davis from Arkansas. I mean, I know that these teams are going to do well. And South Carolina's 5-0 too. A couple of years ago, South Carolina went to the Final Four. They did win back-to-back NIT championships with Ronaldo Balkman about 10, 15 years ago. But South Carolina, that's a team you can't underestimate the Gamecocks.
Yeah, Lamont Paris is the coach for South Carolina in his second season. They did fire Frank Martin, who was the coach back then. But you're right, South Carolina has made it to that level. I don't think South Carolina this year, I think they're a few years away from being competitive. Chris Jans, coach of Mississippi State, was a longtime coach of Mexico State, who made many NCAA tournaments in his tenure there. Has Mississippi State back to playing. I mean, they were competitive under Ben Howland, and they were really competitive under Rick Stansbury for a 16, 17-year period. I think Jans is getting them back to that competitive nature. Mississippi State's always had a really good basketball program in the last 25 seasons. So Mississippi State, another one. SEC basketball is looking good. I really like what I see from Bruce Pearl. I think I really, like I said, I like this Auburn team. Kentucky gave Kansas a run for their money. DJ Wagner, I don't know if you remember him from Memphis. His son plays for Kentucky now. He's just as good as his dad was as a freshman. I mean, the guy can fill it up. Antonio Reeves is putting up 18 points a game. They got Rob Dillingham. They got Trey Mitchell, Wagner, Shepard, and Justin Edwards. They got 6 guys that are in double digits already. I think when you doubt John Calipari and Kentucky teams, that's when he proves you wrong the most. It's when he's the favorite, is when you're like last year or the year before as a 2 seed. You're like, how does this happen? How do you lose as a 2 seed to a team that made it to the Elite 8 that year, but still, like, that's inexcusable. I think Kentucky, though, they're going to bounce back, and I think they're going to be between them, Auburn, Tennessee, and A&M. Those are my top 4 teams. And then you got Arkansas, Mississippi State, LSU, Alabama, Florida, Georgia. Those teams will be competitive and round out the final spots and make the tournament this year. But the top 4, Tennessee, Auburn, A&M, and Kentucky are my top 4 teams in the SEC heading into this season.
That are some good picks, Thrift. I mean, we're going to have at least 8 teams in the tournament, and then I think we're going to have 2 or 3 teams in the NIT. I think Georgia is an NIT team. I think if they could get the threshold is 16 wins. If they're not doing very well in their non-conference games, you need to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. So you can have an impressive resume when it's time for the committee. You're a bubble team. You're on the bubble watch. You get a number 1 seed in the NIT. I mean, that is really the goal right now when you're rebuilding a program. I know that Mike White is in his 2nd year, but I know that the criticism with Tom Crean, Georgia won 6 games before Mike White came over. Yes, he did get Anthony Edwards to come to Georgia. I mean, that was a great signing, but nothing happened. They lost. They did beat Ole Miss in the SEC tournament, and then COVID happened, and we have no idea if Georgia was a tournament team in 2020. But I think that Mike White has got them on the right track. I mean, Sharif Abdul-Rahim's son is playing on Georgia, and he had 19 points against Oregon, and I think that Georgia just needs to continue winning their non-conference games before they get into conference play.
Tommy Lloyd is the name of the coach, longtime assistant under Mark Few at Gonzaga at Arizona, and Arizona is another team. I know they've been putting a lot of people in the NBA these recent couple seasons, including Benedict Mathurin, who I really like a lot for the Indiana Pacers. That guy is a dog. But with that being said, Richard, Arizona's a team too I really like. But if you look at the preseason All-American team, you got like guys like Tyler Nowak, who is from Marquette, who was a reigning Big East Player of the Year. He's preseason. Zach Edey, obviously at Purdue. Kyle Filipowski, of Duke was also one that was in there. Then you got Armando Bacot of North Carolina. There's a lot of big men that were in that preseason All-American team. There's not really many guards. I think there's like 4 big men and 1 guard. I just had the list that was pulled. Oh, Hunter Dickerson of Kansas was the other one that was in there. So Dickerson, Edey, centers, Filipowski, power forward, forward/guard from the kid from Marquette. And then who am I leading off right now, Richard? I'm leaving off somebody.
I'm thinking Duke. Zach Edey. You got Tyrese Proctor from Duke. I mean, just looking at some of the players out there, trying to see who else. I mean, you talk about DJ Wagner playing at Kentucky.
Armando, so here's the start. Here was the 5: Zach Edey, Armando Bacot, Hunter Dickerson, Kyle Filipowski, and all those are big men. And then Tyler Kolek from Marquette. Those are preseason. But you mentioned Duke. Obviously, Duke had I think a really good season in John Shire's first year. And then they keep Filipowski. They bring in a really good recruiting class. You talk about Proctor also says he's going to be in the second year as a point guard. Duke is also another team that is a favorite to be national champions, cut the net down. How about Shaka Smart? If VCU is competitive, goes to Texas, doesn't live up to expectation, and then at Marquette had the number 2 seed last year. No, they got upset, and then this year they got a preseason top 10 team.
Unbelievable.
They return Kolek because I think fit does matter, and I don't think he fit in at Texas, but he definitely fits into those Big East teams, those VCUs at Marquette teams, and I think that's and then the reigning national champion, UConn, you can't count them out, and Houston, who nobody talks about Kelvin Sampson's team. I know they replaced Marcus Sasser, but Houston, since 2017, has made the Sweet 16 every single season. They've won 25 games or more every single year. They were number 1 seed last year. They've been a number 1 seed, number 3 seed. They're a really good basketball program. And Sampson, who won when he was at Oklahoma, got fired when he was at Indiana, and then got back rehired at Houston. And you're seeing what he's done there. Win. Because that's what the man does. He knows how to win. And he won at Washington State, too, before he got the Oklahoma job. You got to throw Houston in there. But what about our guy, Coach Hurley from UConn? Last year, proving people wrong who thought that they were not going to win it all. They not only won it all, they dominated. Jordan Hawkins, obviously, was the guy you're talking about that put on a show at Adame Sanogo, was great. Newton and Caravan, who was the forward last year, could knock down threes. He's their leading scorer this year. And Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton, they got some new faces, but UConn has to be another team that could win it all. And I honestly think in years past, we've had teams that, like last year, we thought North Carolina returning everyone from a team that went to the national title, they're a prohibitive favorite. I didn't see a prohibitive favorite this year. I know people put Kansas in that category. Not for me. I think it's up for grabs, and that's the parity that I love about college basketball. That's why you got San Diego State playing in the FAU in the Final Four last year, because there's how much parity, and the transfer portal has just changed college basketball more than any other sport, I think, when it comes to how it plays out on the court. Any other teams you want to mention, Richard, as we talk about teams that you could see realistically cutting down the net? What I'm asking right now, teams that you think, we got Kansas, we said Houston, UConn, obviously, Arizona. I put Duke in that category. Miami, too. Miami returns a lot from last year's team. Nigel Peck was sensational last year. Baylor, who's won championships. They played a really good Auburn. That was a great game between them and Auburn 2 weeks ago. You know a team I haven't said that's in the top 2? Purdue. Because until I see them make a deep run, and my man Matt Painter, who I think is a great coach and I'm a big fan of, and it's like they're big man you. I mean, going back to 2016, 2017, they had a big guy, and I cannot think of his name. Jesus. And you know what? I hate when my brain has a brain fart like that. But obviously, they got upset last year by a 16 seed. So how does that happen? You return Edey. They're saying they're on their revenge tour, but I don't care what they do during the regular season. They've been a really good regular season team. since 2016, 2017. Matt Painter made it the Sweet 16 that season. Caleb Swanigan, 18-12, was the player of the year and was a big man, like 7'3". The next season, they go 30-17. They were a 2 seed, lose to Texas Tech in the Sweet 16. You know who their big man was? Isaac Haas, 7'2", 14-5. And they also had Matt Harms, who was 7'3", coming off the bench, giving them points. And in 2018, 2019, made it the Elite Eight. Carson Edwards, remember, he put up 20, close to 28 a game.
That's
Isaac
right.
Haas, another big man, 7'3". They were an overtime lucky shot that Virginia tied the game. Dad Kite, if he doesn't hit that, Purdue goes to the Final Four and plays Auburn that year. Then 2021, they were a 4 seed. Their big man center, Zach Edey. So, and then also Travion Williams, who was their senior last year. So you got Edey, you've had Swanigan, you've had Haas, you've had Harms. I mean, that's 4 big men over 7 feet that are vying. All of them were vying for player of the year. Some have won player of the year. You've had Jaden Ivey. You've had Carson Edwards. You've had Vince Edwards. You've had talent there, but have not made the Final Four. And that's why, as much as I like this team, and they got a big win against Tennessee, until I see it in March, I'm just not a believer yet, Richard.
Well, Thrift, I'm going to make a prediction here on this show that Purdue makes it. They make it to the Final Four for the first time since 1980.
I'm not, Richard, you can do that, and that's okay. And I'm glad you're going out on a limb. I'm not giving my picks until at least January. I got to see these teams play their non-conference, few conference games before I decide, you know what, I'm ready to go out on a limb. And we'll have a date. We'll have a date by, let's say,
of course,
after the first week of January. We'll give our Final Four picks then.
Purdue is due to reach the Final Four. I mean, they have not reached in over 40 years. I really am a fan of, like, you remember 2019, we had non-traditional Blue Buds make it to the championship game. We had Virginia and Texas Tech. I mean,
Auburn.
Are you the type – Auburn 2019.
Michigan
in
State.
The Final Four. But are you a fan of, like, it's the same old Final Four teams, Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, Michigan State, Kentucky?
Can I be honest with you? I prefer that. I'm not one of those guys, Richard, that cares about seeing the upsets like San Diego State, FAU. You want to know why the ratings were as bad as they were last year?
That's true.
Because no one cares about watching San Diego State get blown out by UConn. They just don't. They do care about watching Duke, Wisconsin back in 2015. Duke, Wisconsin, undefeated. I mean, Kentucky, Wisconsin, undefeated Kentucky against Wisconsin, 2015. North Carolina, Villanova, even Gonzaga, who I put in the Blue Bud category. No, they don't care about seeing the upset. So I don't want to see that. I wouldn't mind a Purdue being in there. I wouldn't mind seeing Kansas, Arizona, Marquette. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about more like the San Diego States, the Florida Atlantics. No, I don't think people care about those. Heck, even Creighton, who's a top 10 team, and Coach McDermott's got a really good Creighton team who's probably going to win the Big East or second in the Big East behind Marquette this year. I don't put them in there either, but it is up for grabs. The ACC's up for grabs. Duke and Miami are favorites, but North Carolina is coming on strong this year after not even making the NCAA tournament as a preseason #1 team last year.
Shocking.
Texas, Michigan State, who was preseason top 5, already has 2 losses, but don't sleep on them. And if USC ever gets fully healthy and Bronny James comes back, why can't they make a deep run and win the Pac-12? Looking at the Pac-12, I mean, outside of Arizona, everyone else is, I think, on an even playing field. So basically, right now, it's hard. It really doesn't start mattering until you start getting to conference play. None of these non-conference games matter. You really don't know because teams can get hot now and then fade at the end of the season. And I know these are just preseason, but usually the Kentuckys, the Kansases, the Arizonas, the teams that we mentioned that we think have a chance to cut down the nets, they will be there at the end, the Purdue's as well. But the parity is at an all-time high when it comes to college basketball. That's why you can have a San Diego State UConn national championship. Richard, any other final thoughts you want to mention? I think it's Edey's player of the year, and I don't think anyone comes close. I think he runs away with it, to be honest with you. Between him and Dickerson, I know Dickerson had a double-double, and if Kansas finishes undefeated, but I don't think they do. I think the Big 12 is going to be a tough conference, tougher than maybe the Big 10 is this year, and that's why I think Purdue and Zach Edey, they'll have the better record out of the two. They'll be a number 1 seed again, and I think he's going to win Player of the Year.
That is a good pick, Thrift. I know it's in November, and we're talking about college basketball. A lot of the country doesn't start paying attention to college basketball until, I would say, about March, when they're filling out their bracket.
And so,
But
Richard, if we could do this, if we could go ahead and pick our conference champions, not SEC, not tournament champions, just regular season. I think between Tennessee, Auburn, and A&M and Kentucky, I don't know. That one's up for grabs. One of those 4 teams will be the number 1 seed. I think it could be probably between A&M and Tennessee. If you really maybe put a gun to my head, and I probably lean more Tennessee than anyone to win the SEC. The Big 12, obviously, I'm going. I don't know, man.
It's tough. You got Kansas, you got Baylor, you got Texas.
I'm going to go Kansas. I'm going to go Hunter Dickinson, and I am going to go Kansas. Big 10, not as hard. Purdue, plain and simple. Pac-12, Arizona. I don't think it's close for anyone of the other teams. I think they'll be competitive. Big East, well, you got to throw them in there with, you got UConn, you got Marquette, you got Creighton. I think Marquette and Shaka Smart will be a number 1 seed at the end of the year, and I think Tyler Kolak is going to live up to his expectations this preseason. And then ACC, I think it's Duke's to lose. I really do. What about you, Rich?
Those are really good picks. When I look at the landscape of college basketball, I'm going to take a dark horse in the Pac-12. I mean, Arizona is good, but I'm going to say USC. I think they get Bronny James back, and they could win the regular season tournament. And you remember, you got the regular season, then you got the conference tournament. And so you could have a champion in both. I think that both Arizona and USC are going to make the tournament.
And you know what no one's talking about, Richard, before you move on from that? UCLA, Mick Cronin. I know they lost a lot from last year, and they didn't make it to the Final Four as they did the year before, but or 2 years ago, excuse me. But Mick Cronin, UCLA, don't sleep on them at all. They're always a really well-coached basketball team.
Not at all. UCLA is going to be tough. In the ACC, I'm going to pick Miami. I think Miami getting to the Final Four last year. The Big 12, I'm with you. Purdue, because they're going to be my Final Four team. In the Big 12, I'm going to say still Kansas. I think Dickerson is going to have probably compete for the Naismith Player of the Year. And in the SEC, I'm going to say Alabama. They were an overall number 1 seed last year. They are highly ranked. I think Alabama ends up winning that as well. I'm trying to see if we talked about, I'm going to give you a sleeper team for the Big East. Villanova. I know that, like, when they lost Jay Wright, Villanova did.
I'm not with you on that one. I completely disagree on that one, Richard.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to throw out a wild card there. I do like Marquette.
Listen,
I think the Villanova could be a sneaky team. They could sneak up on some people.
Yeah, I'm with you, but I just no, I'm not ready to believe in it, and they're already out of the top 25 again. I think this guy's having a tough time filling his shoes for a Hall of Famer and Jay Wright.
It is hard. It's hard to replace a Jay Wright. I mean,
all right. Yeah, I'm with you, and it's Colorado's another competitive team. I know Michigan State was a favorite in the Big Ten over Purdue heading into the season. But after watching those two teams play the first couple of weeks, I think Purdue and I think Michigan State, they will get back on the right track. They will be the number 2 seed. They'll in the Big Ten tournament. They'll be a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. But they're going through their growing pains right now. And Tommy Izzo's got to get his team right. But there's our college basketball preview. I know it was quick and it was kind of vague, but we don't really have a lot of information on these teams. It's early in the season. Most teams have only played 3 or 4 games, some maybe 5. So as we will continue to cover it, and we'll really go hard when January comes around, and can't wait to continue our conversation with college basketball. All right, let's move on from that, Richard, and let's do some NFL before we get out of here, and then Hawks. NFL-wise, Falcons, much needed buy. Apparently, Desmond Ridder and the Falcons are saying the right things. They got to reset. He's starting back again. All the games left are winnable in front of them. They could easily win 7 straight and finish 11-6 and win the conference, win the division. I think they still will win the division. It's just looked ugly these last couple of weeks. They take on New Orleans at home. They get that win. They're in first place. at 5-6. So this is the battle for first place in a very weak division. I think they get the win. And I think this is going to be Arthur Smith's best coach game. And he's going to lead us to believe he's got everything fixed. And then he's going to pull a Houdini. If the Falcons do lose this game, then you start putting them on the hot seat of getting fired by the end of this year. Because I just don't see how he keeps the locker room and the fan base from turning against him if you continue to lose games that you should win. Richard.
I agree. I think the Falcons do get the win over the Saints, but it's not going to be easy. They're going to have Falcons fans on pins and needles. I'm going to say Younghoe Koo gets a game-winning field goal, and the Falcons just sneak out a win. But they're going to be playing a game with a Saints team that is – I'm going to come out and say they're dysfunctional. Derek Carr is not the answer at quarterback. They got coaching problems with Coach Dennis Allen. Michael Thomas is not even going to play. He's suspended. Alvin Kamara has had his issues. The one bright spot with the New Orleans Saints is that defense has been outstanding. Marshawn Lattimore might be the best cover corner, one of the best cover corners. I mean, no disrespect to Sauce Gardner and some of the other corners out there. But you got Demario Davis, a middle linebacker, very underrated. Cam Hayward. I mean, they just have a great defense. And I think that the Saints are going to make the Falcons uncomfortable. Desmond Ridder is going to probably make a mistake in this game. But the Falcons are better. They have better weapons. Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. The Falcons should win this game comfortably, but I think it's going to be closer than people think.
I think so too. And then the last couple games, 49ers Seahawks is going to be a good one.
Oh, Thanksgiving. I cannot wait.
Browns and Broncos. Broncos have won 4 straight and are 500. Who thought that was going to happen when they were 1-5?
Yeah.
Everybody's writing them for dead. Cowboys, Lions obviously got their annual Thanksgiving game. Just quickly talk about your 49ers. I think they got back on the right track. They looked great last week, dominated Tampa Bay, who kept it close for a good part of the first half. I think they go on the road in Seattle. Sunday night game, the best game of the day, I think, on NBC. I think 49ers go in and win big. And that game against the Eagles is going to be looming large here in a few weeks. Can't wait for that one as the Eagles got a big win against Kansas City, down by 10 at halftime and end up winning that by 4. That was hard to swallow if you're a Chiefs fan, but 49ers Seahawks, Richard.
Yeah, I like how your mind and my mind are really thinking alike on some of these games. I agree. I think the 49ers go into Seattle and get the win. Brock Purdy, a perfect passer rating against the Buccaneers. But that's really not the story. I think ever since the 49ers got Chase Young on the defense, that they are playing with a different intensity, as you saw a couple weeks ago against Jacksonville. Yes, they are going to be hurting, losing all-pro safety Talona Hufanga, who's out with an ACL injury. But their best rookie that they picked in the 3rd round out of Penn State, Jair Brown, he did get an interception. You plug and play. I mean, it's next man up mentality for a reason. And I think that the San Francisco 49ers, they have too many weapons with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he has having an MVP season. I think the 49ers are going to run the table. I don't think they'll beat the Eagles. I think the Eagles are very difficult, especially at home. And you get them into a 4th and 1, they're pretty much automatic. I mean, the Eagles are just playing on another level because they have probably the best offensive line in football. And Jalen Hurts, he's a top 5 quarterback. I'm going to come out and say it. I think this game against Buffalo, I think it's going to be very interesting because the offensive coordinator for Buffalo is Joe Brady, who was the architect to the 2019 LSU Tigers, who caught lightning in a bottle and won the national championship. Joe Burrow passed for 60 touchdowns and just had an incredible season. And Joe Brady gets an opportunity to be the OC in Buffalo.
We'll see how that plays out. That's going to be another marquee game that you'll see on Thursday. But I mean, on Sunday, but enjoy everyone your Thanksgiving when you're watching those games. Lastly, the Hawks, who were 6-4, have lost 3 straight home games. And I'm honestly starting to get worried, Richard. Early in the season when they were 6-4, I was like, man, they're starting to play really good basketball. I honestly think they'll be a top 4 seed. Since then, they've lost to New York, Philadelphia, and they were up by 15 at halftime against Indiana, 13, and ended up losing 157-152. No defense.
Unbelievable.
And just, I'm worried about the Hawks, man. And to be honest, if they don't turn it around, I know they're playing in the East. It's not that good. But this is terrible, man. At this point, looking at the schedule, as many home games you have, and you should not have lost 3 straight. You should be 9-4 right now. I think you should have won all 3. And you're 6-7. I know it's early in the season, but Quinn's got to get these guys rolling. Because if not, I think major changes got to happen, because this is not the roster that can win a championship. And you're not firing the coach again.
No, not at all. But the one thing that the Hawks lacked in a long time, they don't have that two-way defensive stopper. I really was hoping it was DeAndre Hunter.
I did too, and I don't believe it is, man. I think that he is
he's not the guy.
And I think he showed us who he is. He's a really good 4th option. I don't even think he's a good 3rd option, to be honest. And they need him to be more of a 2, if anything. And he just can't be it, man. And I hate it, because I think there is enough talent on this team in this East to be a top 3, top 4 team. And you're just not seeing it click. And maybe it will. Maybe it'll turn around. And by the time Christmas is here, we're talking about the Hawks being 6, 7, maybe 10 games over 500. But what I'm watching right now, this is going to be another 500 basketball team, 41 when we head into the end of the season.
A couple of years ago, when the Hawks won 60 games, they had a very special two-way. He was more of a defensive player. Thabo Sebalosha.
And Damari Carroll too.
Damari Carroll was a great defensive player. I mean, this is why the Hawks won 60 games. But I like the way that Thabo Sebalosha actually played. He did play for the Oklahoma City Thunder. He was a pest. He would follow your best offensive player, and he would stick to him like glue. And you got to have somebody like that. You got to have a defensive stopper. You can't let Tyrese Halliburton go off on you, and the Pacers end up scoring 157 points. That is unacceptable. And the Hawks, they can win some games, but when you're playing elite teams and you're trying to stop a Jimmy Butler, you're trying to stop a Kevin Durant, and they're going off for 38, 40 points because you don't have anybody that can stop them, that's what they're missing. They need to get some players that, I'm looking back like at a Bruce Bowen or Tony Allen or
right.
Ruben Patterson, somebody who's a defensive specialist. Don't worry about the offense. The offense will come with Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. Go get a defensive specialist.
Yeah. And you got to find someone that's willing to do the little things, and they don't have that right now because no one is doing the little things right. That's why you're blowing leads and giving up 157 daggone points.
Unbelievable.
A game at home that you should have won easily by 20 or 30. Well, Richard, we've had a lot of fun. Thank you to our guests, Rick Beach and Jack Patterson. We hope you have enjoyed your Thanksgiving tomorrow. We will have high school game day live on the field at 6 o'clock for the GAPS 2A state championship game, Calvary and Skipstone at Calvary, and then kickoff at 7:30. Cannot wait for that one. Me and Richard will be on the call, so we'll have some great guests on game day. Thank you to Steve Smith, and thank you to everyone that watched tonight. Make sure to like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, and as the great Wes Hargrove says, stay classy, everybody.